Welcome to the STR Data Lab.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the STR Data Lab. I'm Jamie Lane, Chief Economist at AirDNA, and I'm joined today by a really interesting guest. We've got Sam Dundas at Besty AI. Sam, welcome to the show.
It's great to see you, Jamie. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so feel like I've seen you a lot this past month, having never met you prior to then. We saw each other in Porto and then in Phoenix. So first I wanted to ask, could you just give us a breakdown of what Bestie AI is? And then like how have you just taken the industry by storm so quickly? I feel I first heard about you, maybe a year ago, and it seems like you guys have grown very quickly and become top of mind, really, and it seems like overnight.
Well, first off, that thanks a lot. That means a lot coming from you. So yeah, I guess the first thing is why we decided to build this was that I've been a property manager for 4 years. I started with owning our own condos as a sort of a pet project through COVID to keep me and my brothers connected. It was a fun way for us to be together, and we bonded as a family, and then that went well and snowballed and bought a second one. And then I looked around the area, started managing properties for other people because once you get a operation set up, it's, the incremental listing is that much more easy to manage. And so I sort of did that on the side for a couple of years, starting in 2020. And so I started using PMSs and just sort of went off the deep end. I bought an AirDNA subscription before buying the properties. And then I think just as like a generally interested tech forward person, I was like, wow, everything is so connected by these APIs. And it was like a really interesting, the more and more I dove into the industry as an operator, I was poking around at vendors and software and saying, oh, that'd be cool to build something as well. And so that's like a little bit about me. I ended up running a portfolio of 35 units, which are still active and running on Airbnb today. And on the software side, what I found was all of these PMSs have done so much heavy lifting in all of these integrations with the OTAs and all of this workflow software. And there's so many of them. So what we decided our approach with Bestie was to build everything, all of our automation software. So for AI, what comes to mind is guest communications, conversational upselling, task management, like responding to reviews, analyzing reviews, like all of those things that you just kind of lift your hands up and say, this is a good job for an AI to do, but build it all directly into the PMS. So I think that's one thing that's made us really different is that we're trying to basically supercharge these PMSs with like very practical AI applications instead of sort of pulling everybody into like a third-party tool. And I think that's what's resonated with a lot of users because it meets them where they are. Change management's really easy, rollout's really seamless. And so I think that's part of our success so far has just been making it extremely easy for people to use.
And so do you think that's sort of led to has that been the sort of key piece on like the adoption that you guys seen? So like how many listings are you guys up to that are connected? Like what does that growth look like?
Yeah. So today, I just checked the other day, we have about 17,000 paying properties on the platform and, about another 7,000 in the sort of pipeline. We do a free trial. So there's always a pretty large funnel there. And we've grown, we're just shy of 1 million in revenue in our first year. So we went from 0 to about 1 million in revenue, which is sort of like the Goldilocks zone goal is you have to have all these arbitrary goals as a founder, but that was one that we really wanted to smash. And
Yep.
so now we're thinking like the question is how do you get from 1 to 10? And I think ultimately, that's what matters most. Like, how is the adoption? How are you going to build something people are paying for? And then I think where we started was there's so much potential for distractions of all the possibilities that you can get sort of stuck and frozen in what you build first. And so what we thought was like, can we deliver on what we call like a hallucination proof chatbot? So it wasn't always hallucination proof. Like getting, it's one thing to generate a draft response for people, but to actually, have the agency to have the AI send it automatically was like a big jump. So just for like sort of a recap on us, we launched our first paid plans in October of last year. So we just turned a year old. And I think we started with a very simple product, which is just draft mode. By January, February, we started pushing people into autopilot, and that was sort of a trial through fire. of all the edge cases, promising refunds, saying I'll send a contractor, like all the nightmares you can imagine. I was the first sort of tester, but at a certain point, you gotta send it out to other people. And so I think what a big part of our success that we've leaned on is just like, you know, trust me, I have a complete vested interest in you staying as a customer. If I'm saying try autopilot and makes a bad answer, like you're just going to churn. So I think getting people to jump to that and then seeing how well it performs, I think has been a huge unlock for our success. And then bolting on other automation features has been sort of part of the roadmap. But the main core thing has been like, can you build the best in class AI chatbot? And that alone is enough to get a lot of interest instead of me coming to you and saying, we're going to do everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and from what I've heard, like, in terms of AI chatbot, different uses through using them as agents and, like, bringing them through, it's like, it's really easy to do a demo and get a demo
Mhm.
running and get a demo that you can show to people, but then it's really hard to bring it into a marketplace and ecosystem where it's being leveraged on every day, and you do get to those sort of edge cases really quickly, and
Mhm.
you start to see, like, how much those edge cases, like, let's say you get the response 90% right, like,
Yeah.
is that
And
10%,
10%.
like, is that really good or is that just terrible?
Yeah.
And and guess communication in short-term rentals, it's not life or death, but it could be good stay versus bad stay or a refund versus not refund. Like, how have you seen the adoption of sort of and people moving from draft mode into sort of auto mode and, like, stay in auto mode?
Yeah, so I think our philosophy when building the product was like, you have these two levers, which is like confidence and a number of messages you're able to respond to. So our thing was instead of saying we're going to respond to 90% of questions and set that as the expectation and then have this big margin of error, what we started with is like, hey, realistically, man, this thing is going to do 20 or 30% of your responses. It's going to do all the softball questions. What's the Wi-Fi? How do I get in? Basic amenities,
Mhm.
inquiry questions, things like that. And we started from there and just said, on a trust level, the only thing you're going to knock us for is it's not that useful because why would you pay for something that's only helping you with 10 or 20% of questions? But that's where we started. And then you add more API endpoints so that now you know calendar availability and now you know nearby recommendations and now you plug in guidebooks and now you get to 30 or 40%. And then basically incrementally working it out that when I'm pitching a customer, like I would much rather, me even as a customer, I'd much rather know I can rely on this thing and it's going to help me 40% of the time consistently than for you to tell me it's going to help with 80% and then be wrong 20% of the time. So I think that I couldn't say this 6 months ago, but today you could ask any of our customers and they're all pretty blown away their knock is like probably the percentage. And I'd say like, honestly, we're probably about 55, 60% of all questions right now, but the reliability there I think is second to none. And I think that's what set us apart from the rest because there's plenty of people. This is an obvious use case. So I think it's probably similar to how many access control apps that existed 5 years ago or dynamic pricing apps a decade ago.
Yep.
Um,
So, and in watching the space for a few years now, I feel like we've swung some different ways in terms of automated messaging. Like, you look back 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago, it was mostly like, I've got a team, I maybe base that team out of the Philippines or somewhere offshore where they can just respond to messages, and, like, we try to lower the cost of responding quickly as much as possible. And then there was sort of this push into automated messaging of, like, and most of these messages I can just automate, like, I can see the response. I'm going to automate those as much as possible, but it's essentially built through templates, and built into your PMS, and we've seen really great and advancement through the PMSs and creating all those automations. And then and it's funny, I was just talking with a friend, earlier this week, and he's like, we had done all this automation, and then what we found is that our communication scores on Airbnb, like, are just terrible. Like, we did all this automation, but now, like, we're responding, but people know that it's not personalized. I'm not seeing the on, like, upsells that I'd want because they're clearly not personalized enough in a way that people know it's me talking and not, like, this automated message that just goes out to everyone. And so, like, we're gonna pull it back, and we're going to start doing all this manually. And then at the same time, he was like, but we also just signed up for Besty AI and we're going to try to have the AI do it. And it was like, there's this notion of like scale and that messaging needs to scale, but for it to really resonate, it also needs to be personalized. So, like, is AI going to be the thing that allows us to scale, but do it in a personalized basis? Like, how do you think about this sort of push and pull on automation versus like actually getting really strong review scores and resonating with guests?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. I think automated messaging is not hospitality, like but it's required because I remember when I was getting this set up, I was like, okay, yeah, booking confirmation, send the thank you, 2 days before check-in, let them know it's going to happen. Day of check-in, send the check-in instructions. I have to be able to lean on that because like when you get after 2 or 3 listings even, no way do I want to be on the hook to send those out. And it's also sort of meat and potatoes of what they need to know. Like a lot of people just say, give me what I need to know, good to go. But you run into these sort of awkward things. It's happened to me a million times where you're in the middle of a conversation with somebody and then the 2 days into a reservation message pops out and then you have to go disregard that message. And then you end up in this really annoying, is it annoying to the point where I'm going to invest a lot of money to make it not happen? Not necessarily, but it's just a pain. So for us, and the other thing too is, well, 80% of what I need to do is covered in automated messaging. Why do I need to use AI? Which is a more broad question of us as a software, what we're working on, which is a lot more on the revenue automation side through conversational upselling. But let's just sticking to the hospitality side. I do think that as people start to scale, there's a lot of just like low hanging fruit of yes, like for those edge cases, when people are asking questions, being able to respond to them really quickly and have them have no idea that it's an AI. I think like people are just sort of blown away by the response quality. And as a result, they just lean into it more because at the end of the day, you just have so many things to do as an operator and like those little like shooting off those, yeah, no worries. Hope you and your wife enjoyed your stay. Hey, thanks again for leaving a great review. Like those things, you have bigger fish to fry. So I think like going forward, it's going to be, I mean, eventually what it'll be is that you don't need to have automated messages at all.
Mhm.
Like that's not a burden that we want to take on right now because it's not necessary. Because like I don't need to explain, you know what I mean? There's not actually
Yep.
that much value, but eventually the AI is just going to know, yeah, just semantically every time it's going to be so dynamic that yes, I know the day before it's 11 a.m. I have to send the check-in instructions, or they booked an early check-in, so I'm actually going to send those check-in instructions early, and then I'm going to go back and forth with them, and you're not going to end up with those little awkward edge cases. But I think for the next sort of 18 months, we have no intention of like taking over their automated messages, though that's often a request we get.
Awesome. So, and maybe that's a good and segue into what the focus is going forward. Because, and you mentioned like there's maybe always tiny objects of things that you guys could go in and try to automate. There's, and maybe the task management of the world of when you're getting all these messages coming in, like a lot of it triggers other things that should be happening within the property of people that need to get notified, tasks that need to be created, things that need to be tracked, and maybe just expanding across more PM, creating more ways to sort of interact with potential clients. Like, where do you guys see and sort of the growth over the next and 12, maybe 12 months coming from?
Yeah, so I think the double-edged sword about this industry is like the integrations with the PMSs make it so easy and seamless to like to work with customers, way more than I thought it would be. I would expect it's more of like you do the integration and then you have to go out and hunt for all your customers. But there's so much liquidity in these marketplaces for vendors, especially I think as a new category, people are interested and they're curious. And so I think a big thing for us, the reason why it's a double-edged sword is you have these great conversations with people and then the conversation ends when, oh, I'm on track, I'm on streamline, I'm on these PMSs that we're not integrated with. So there's this very sort of boring, job to be done over the next 12 months, which is just go out and integrate with everybody. So that's a huge part of our CapEx right now is just building those integrations. But you as the, 400th customer don't want to hear that being on our roadmap. You don't want to hear like, it doesn't bring any more value to customer A that we can go get 1,000 more customers. So it's
Yep.
it's balancing that with, well, all of these cool things that are happening in the LLMs world. Like, how do we pull that right to the doorsteps of these customers? So it's like kind of a fine balance. So about 60% of our CapEx right now is going towards integrations, and then 40% is on the roadmap, which is how do we get deeper, more embedded into the operation where the messaging is sort of the tip of the iceberg because if you hire a VA or you have onshore staff, that's just one very small thing of what they do. For sure, it's helpful to make that more automated or to build a unified brand voice, which is a big thing that we do as well. So, read through all of our messages and build something that's like consistent across all of our agents. Like we have some customers that have 35 agents in the Philippines. You know what I mean? So being able to have the corporate onshore side say, this is how we speak, this is how we don't speak, have that proliferated across the whole customer, across all their agents is one thing. But on the other hand, it's like, what else can we do? And so what comes to mind there is what are revenue generating activities that people do manually? So we were the first to launch this like gap night upseller, which just seems like such an obvious thing. It's the first thing I actually asked my PMS when I launched. I said, hey, I have all these, you're helping me with automated messages. Where can I send a trigger when there's this Monday or Wednesday night? It's a super simple feature. Just have Besty scan through your calendar every day and shoot out messages for gap nights. So that was like our first revenue automation feature. And that was like dynamite. And then you can apply, that's just silly automated messaging, but you can apply, make that more dynamic, when to send the offers, how much to discount. Same thing applies to early check-ins and late checkouts. And so, we always say, yes, there's all these things you do manually that you don't like doing. So responding to reviews, reading the reviews, building task lists from that, responding to guests. But then there's all these things that you just can't do that an AI would be the best at. Like you can't sit through your calendar every day and look at those gap nights. You can't figure out what check-in and checkout times are by reading through the conversations. Like the AI can detect if somebody says, we're out at 7 a.m., update the checkout time so that your cleaning team knows they can go early. So it's those two those two things that we're kind of working on. How do we make the existing tasks better? And then how do we unlock an entire other category of things that humans just aren't built to do?
Yep. So it does seem like you guys are moving into the automated messaging, but not in the ones that are super simple, like the simplest ones where it's just like, hey, you've mentioned it, like after you book, send a message, 2 days before, send a message. It's whatever those automated messages are that take the next level thinking that aren't easy and aren't existing in the PMSs today that you could build in. Like those seem like low lift and easy to do for you guys.
Yeah, like I'll give you some examples. Like somebody buys an early check-in, well, the lock's not going to work. But the APIs are connected to the lock management system. So you have to be able to open the aperture of the access and make sure the code works. So if you sell somebody a $50 early check-in, that they can check in at 2 p.m. and that it's going to work the same, or somebody does, you sell a gap night, someone says, yeah, let's do it. Well, post the, charge the card, change the reservation, like there's just one, you can go, we're just inch deep, mile wide, but you can go deeper and deeper, full cycle, so that's sort of what we're saying is like, is there going to be enough value to go deeper here versus build an entirely new, feature that might be like, for example, our direct booking widget, which has been really popular. It knows all the rates and availabilities of every single listing on your direct booking site. And it knows all the data about it, amenities, house rules, everything like that. So you can just go into the chatbot and say, hey, what's available in Breckenridge from October 19th to 23rd? That's family friendly for 4 people, buy the ski mountain under $2,000 and then just get a recommendation right away. Like that's a home run feature versus we could go full cycle on gap nights and collecting payment, but people, so we're sort of exploring, like our roadmap is just heavily dictated by, I would say, our top 25 customers to say, hey, what is it going to take for you guys to stick around? You know what I mean? Like, what do we have to do? We're sort of like a gun for hire, AI tool that can, that's pretty dynamic and scrappy. That's been sort of our MO since day one.
So you mentioned that one around upsells, like on maybe early check-in, and that it could then go into the PMS and change the time that the codes sort of work with. And is that sort of use case live, or is that something you're saying that you guys could be doing?
Yeah. So what we have now is we just look at like the cleaning status of apartments or units to see on a same day turn, when that listing status gets cleaned, whether that's from Breezeway or from their in-house task management, then to push a message to the next guest saying, hey, you can check in now as early as you want, either for a fee or just doing it for free, which is, I'll give you just a data point, like 26% of all of our questions are just early check-in. Like over it's insane. So what we do when we're like, how do you make the chatbot better? Just look at the reasons why Besty can't respond. And 26% of the time, it's just an early check-in request. Yeah. So we want to go deeper on that. Right now, it's just sort of simple automations. Hey, if the unit isn't booked 24 hours before and you do 1 night stays or 2 night stays, then you can for sure send a message saying, hey, you can check in all day. Late checkout though, completely different beast because you have to run this expected value calculation on, is it worth me selling a late checkout for $50 on a Sunday for sure money in the bag, or a 40% likelihood of this Sunday booking for $80. So that's kind of your neck of the woods. We're like, what are the average occupancies for Sundays in this type of unit? And does it make more sense as an operator? Well, no human should have to do that calculation, right? That's all numbers. So that's where I think we can go deeper. But now we're sort of getting into like the roadmap over the next sort of 6 months of like, how do you really make an impact outside of some of this like low hanging fruit, glorified automated messaging? You know what I mean?
And so right now, and it looks like you guys are integrated with the PMSs. Are there any other sort of verticals within the space that you imagine that you guys could be integrated with? Or is it, and the PMS is like, and more than likely it for the foreseeable future, given all there are the ones and to integrate with?
Yeah, there's just so much work to be done there. I think it's sort of I think we have sort of like internal revenue and like adoption goals within this market before looking at the hotel space. That's really the only other place we can run. And it's interesting, like you don't have the same sort of fragmentation for hotels as far as PMS, like system of record, right? You have like Agilysys, Sabre, Oracle's product. Like there's maybe 5 or 6 monoliths. But what's interesting about that market is that if we thought like STRs is relatively slow moving, like that is the modern sort of, like tech enabled services, I have to imagine the systems of record in the hotel space are even a decade behind. But the problem is like the experience for the guest isn't conversational. You book with Hilton, you just get an email. It's completely transactional. There's no hospitality layer. I do think we're seeing a lot of this sort of cross pollination from hotels into short-term rentals. So these like big groups like Accor and, Hilton or IHG or whatever, just pushing distribution into where the guest's wallet is, where are they spending the money, which is more on the OTAs. So I think that there's an opportunity to help these. Like I spoke to a large hotel group recently who said they have on the order of 25,000 unanswered messages, which is just like crazy. Like, and I actually, when we were in Phoenix, I stayed in an Airbnb from this, sort of hotel group, and I didn't get we had a fire alarm going off the entire time, like the low battery thing. And even when you unplugged it, it just wouldn't turn off. It was impossible to sleep. And then guess what I did? I went to Airbnb. I said, we're booking another Airbnb. I got a 50% or a 60% refund on that booking. All they had to do was like respond. Had they responded and said they were sending somebody, like, or even just like acknowledge the issue, Airbnb probably would have given them a little credit. But there's so much. So like, there's just a lot of complexity in that market. But for the next sort of 18 months, we're like all in on STR. Like there's so much work to be done there.
Yep. So this is maybe a question, and just because I'm curious, but can you just like, I use sort of ChatGPT every day, and I found where it helps my workflow. I found the right sort of prompts that sort of help in my day. Can you just like walk us through basically like how does your tech work? Like, is it like collecting all my messages, running it through like some AI? Like, what is happening to make automated messages work in a way that's sort of seamless with my PMS?
Yeah, so for sure. So like it helps that I'm not a technical guy. Like I'm, you're building it or you're selling it sort of thing. Like I'm the latter. But just at the rate that this stuff is getting advanced, the whole idea of being technical is going to be so abstract in 10 years, just as how fast tech's moving. Like, and so so the way I think about it is, so any person can go to ChatGPT and have this sort of question answer format. That's exactly how our system works, but over a bunch of steps. So it's basically like a factory where the question comes in on one end, and then you have to, in the first step, like you said, Bestie goes through your entire PMS, all of the data it can find. It turns those into individual data points. It references, you brought up, hey, how do I get the air conditioning working? I'm going to go into the database over at Bestie before I respond and say, what do I know about air conditioning? Okay, pull that into the prompt. Okay, what's the question? Okay, it's not asking, is there an air conditioning? It's asked, how does it work? Okay, I look at those data points. Then it moves to the next step and it says, did I answer the question properly? Yes or no? Is there any hallucinations that it made up? Yes or no? And you can imagine basically about a 12-step yes or no, pass, fail. Filter number 13, does this match the brand voice? Filter number 4, is this being creative? Is this the right language? Or am I being too blunt? Am I being hospitable? So it runs through all this thing and then all within sort of a 30-second period and then pops out an answer. And I think that is an 86 page like linguistic prompt. Like it's incredible how long it is and how many use cases there are. And I'd say what makes us different is that we're doing about 2,000 messages a day. And like I said, we have a vested on autopilot, 2,000 and 2,500 a day, compounded over a year. And every time it makes a mistake, we lose a customer. So you can imagine the amount of patching of holes we've done to get it to a point where it doesn't hallucinate. And so what I think is, yes, anybody could probably go, whether it's a vendor, like a PMS, a competitor, or a really like product, like forward PM. Like some of our customers have used ChatGPT and other models to automate parts of their business. But the reality is this is, you stay within your sphere of competence and the things that why would you try to build that when that's all we do all day, every day, not across 100 properties, not across 1,000, but across 16,000. And next year it'll be 60,000. So I think like just running that process every day and getting incrementally better is how we built a better product. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So in terms of like an advanced, maybe let's keep it short, like over the next like 2 to 3 months. Like, do you think more advancements gonna happen from improvements from the LLM side or improvements from you guys getting your prompts just better?
It's actually how much we are. The cool thing is it's like treading this line between natural language of responding versus does the AI have to write something into a code base to change something like structural, like change a reservation or update a checkout time or create a task. And so it's actually what's tough about that is non-structured back and forth question, what we call hospitality Q&A, which is like 60% of our autopilot is just thank you. Yeah, no problem. Like, have a great trip. Thank you. Like, it's a lot of those.
Yeah.
So the non-hospitality communication, I think, is where we have the most work to do. Where it's like, how do you? And they call it function calling, which is like, take in a request and then not only output an answer. And this is sort of the agents thing, right? Of like, what am I doing into the PMS? What am I writing and posting? And so I think it's less. I mean, every day we have like we have an AI prompt engineer who that's all he does is look at messages every single day. He's sort of like the man behind the curtain for the engine here. And I promise it's not like 1,000 people just writing responses. Okay, like there is an AI model running, and he's the man for that. But I think it's just how do we get deeper into the actual writing code into these PMSs, which has a super low margin. You can't mess that up. And an example would be which would be super cool, is like, how do we change the top line of the listing descriptions based off those events happening that are like most likely to get booked that weekend? So if I'm booking my Airbnb in Verma, in 2 months because it's a conference happening, how do I post a new updated description that says, hey, 2 minutes from the Phoenix Convention Center? That's where I think that's more so where we're going.
How much of that work is scalable across the PMSs? Like, if you figure out for one, is it like all of a sudden it works for the others, or is it literally like I got to know the code base and the APIs to push to one, and it's going to be entirely different than the other, and it's just a mess to try to roll out something new because you've got to figure out how to essentially integrate into each PMS one by one.
Yeah, it's completely different. There's no standardization. They're all built in their own sort of vacuums. And the year that they were built matters a lot. So like how the code base works and also just think like for your use case, like calendar rates and availabilities, that's been around forever. This like AI messaging use case is brand new. So like none of these PMSs really have. I mean, I know I have to give them credit, like many of them do, but the one it's not top on their radar. How do I add AI messaging endpoints? So you have to get pretty creative on how you build the integrations there. And I think the biggest thing is just going to be that's our biggest job is just getting the integrations done, and each one is its own beast. So that's what I mean is sort of the blocking and tackling over the next year of getting those things done so that we can integrate these folks.
Awesome. Maybe one more question on there of like how much, and because all of these PMSs sort of and are web based now. It's not like it's not like the oracles where you got like and you're typing into the mainframe and it's DOS based and like so like can a lot of this like live in the browser where it's like I'm sort of helping me type and it's like going back and sort of the integration is on the back end and the front end, like it doesn't matter what PMS I'm in, it just knows that I'm sort of interacting with the chat, or does there have to be sort of the deep integration in with the PMS to like make it happen maybe through the back end?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the perceived like experience of the user, which is often different than the decision maker, right? Like we'll sell to the, these highly like, sophisticated operators that are running either an owned or a managed portfolio, and then they live and breathe in spreadsheets, and it's all P&Ls, and they're not the ones in the trenches responding to hundreds of messages a day. So they need to understand how it works, that we're getting all of the information that matters. But to the end user, it needs to feel exactly like you said, like what we actually do. And the way when I say we embed to the PMS, you literally have to add a Chrome extension, the Besty Chrome extension, and then it just augments the PMS. You're just in like AI mode with like, sentiments of the guest, conversation summaries, draft responses, AI detected tasks that you can push to task management softwares. And so it's easier to explain it as, yeah, if you're using, when you signed up, just send this Chrome extension link and it just magically works. But all of that is only possible because of a really, really deep bench on the engineering side. And so, but that shouldn't matter to any customer. It should be, and the expectation is, especially when they go into ChatGPT and they can get any access to any information instantly, I think the expectation is it's pretty high. They expect that it's just as good at answering their questions in ChatGPT as it's going to be for this use case. But then there's a lot of nuance that makes it much more complicated than that. So I think like the product design is never pull them away from the PMS. That's going to be their system of record. They don't want to switch PMSs. They don't want to move into another unified inbox, and meet them there and make it seamless.
In terms of the business, how worried are you that Brian Chesky and Sam Altman are best friends, and that we could or should and develop something that would be sort of best in class in terms of auto responding, and not necessarily that it would put you guys out of business, because I think the multi-channel aspect of your business is huge, but at least set the expectation really high on like how the responses should be, given that Airbnb did it.
Yeah, this doesn't help our case, but I think it's more likely that they team up and build the sort of red team to block AI messaging because of like just Brian Chesky's focus as a design company, is like knowing the customer, giving the customer the most authentic, real experience. I think that it's more likely they reverse engineer to say, was this coming from a PMS that was an AI generated answer? And if so, it's not allowed. That would be our biggest risk. The other thing is like, banking on Airbnb to build hosting tools to make hosting easier. It feels like out of their MO, given that they haven't done a lot. I mean, they have done some of the like smart pricing, but they haven't built PMS for example. And I always say this, like, we're not going after these onesie twosies, people who aren't using a PMS as well. And I do think that just from our sort of retention, that I'd like to think it's linear, meaning if you have one or two properties, you're getting just as much value from having 40 or 50. But I think it's actually like those customers are more like consumers than they are like, small to medium businesses running an operation. So if they do that, yeah, if we ever were to do a direct Airbnb integration, we would probably not win because they have a little bit more money than us. But
For now.
but I think for now, yeah, but I think on the PMS side, being through the channel, the PMS and what the customers want, I'm not too worried about that. I mean, on the list of like neuroticism of things you have to be worried about as a founder, that's not top of the list.
Yeah. It's funny, and pick up that point of Airbnb creating a red team, like, we keep an eye on like Airbnb's sort of career page, and they were hiring, it was like 2 years ago, they were hiring like a team to stop people from scraping their website. Like, oh,
Right.
this can't be good for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Read the JDs.
But in reality, it ended up being good for us because like all they really cared about, the ones that were like mass scraping, like doing it like almost DNS like attack type, not like, and we sort of think of ourselves as friendly scrapers, like only only pulling the data we need and the volume that we need. And so it didn't, or hasn't, and knock on wood, impact us yet. But like, yeah, and they can change things on a dime, and it can obviously and could impact the business. So moving on to sort of where the industry's going, the growth that we've seen in property managers, there's this sort of, I feel like, differentiation between large scale property managers like the Vicasas and the V-Trips of the world that own 5,000 plus properties. And there's the sort of
Craft.
there's the craft and there's the scale issues that go along with that. There's the scale of like I sort of put it in like the 150 to maybe 1,000 units where it's like you're moving from a small team to in one market to a decent sized team in multiple markets. There's like the maybe and small scale property manager, single market, 20 to 150 listings, like, and they've seen growth, but they're not yet into breakout mode, haven't yet seen things start to break really. As you guys think about and where you're sort of positioned to make the biggest impact in the industry, and where do you see it? And or is it across all of those?
Yeah, no, I think that there's definitely, it's going to become increasingly difficult for self-managed owners of this asset class to drive better returns than long-term rentals. I think the opportunity for everybody in these sort of what I would consider kind of beyond a side hustle, side project, call it 10 to 15 properties. Like we have people that start with us 6 to 8 months ago, 10 to 15, they get right into our sort of ICP, which our average user has about 50 properties. And so I think the opportunity in the market is as people are using software to automate their business, as they're squeezing every penny out of every single night and all these ancillary upselling revenue opportunities, that the market is going to consolidate to instead of 50% of properties being run, 50% of inventory in the States being run by, people that have one or two or three properties, that's going to compress a lot. And just because the profitability index of these mid-sized, small to medium-sized operators is going to just be better with automation. And that doesn't necessarily just mean us, but the whole industry pushes so much towards that I just find it hard for somebody who's running a 9 to 5 and has this property up in, the Catskills is going to drive the same returns as somebody who's just living and breathing every day. So I think that alone is going to drive a lot of those listings under management into the PMS sphere, which is when we can help them. And then I think generally speaking, these consumer facing companies like Airbnb and Vrbo are putting so much money into capturing the wallets of the consumer is that and you're seeing it more and more where you have like hotel groups that are needing to get their inventory, right, properly regulated inventory into these OTAs, which is then once again going to drive more inventory, which is going to help us sell into it. And so I think those are the two biggest drivers of the growth of this market. I think any sort of regulation that like you'll have these black swan events in New York City or Barcelona or things like that make people think, oh, is this thing going to collapse on itself? It's like, no, like tourism is so huge. And yeah, there's semantics of where they're booking and what kind of the inventory it is, but it's just nobody's going to stop traveling. And people, these OTAs might become the booking app of reference, but it may not be in a traditional, like chalet or somebody's apartment. It might be more like a better inventory. But I also think the experience is great. Like when I travel to a hotel in Europe, I get a WhatsApp number and I can just text the concierge, if I need something and that kind of thing. I don't pick up the phone, in the middle of the hotel and call them. So I think that people are going to demand a bit more of a personalized experience. And overall, I think that a lot of inventory is going to be passing through these softwares and it's going to continue to grow. And that we just need to be super mindful of like, how do we make their jobs easier? For you guys, that's, a lot of that is like getting the most data about each property and what's the perfect sort of price point and the real sort of, occupancy rates and return rates. And that's sort of the top of funnel. Like I see AirDNA is kind of like the top of funnel for people getting into this industry, right? I think that most people buy their property because of data from you guys, and so as long as that's rolling and the data's good there and people are making informed decisions, I think that this industry is going to continue to grow as this starting as sort of a niche asset class into now maybe a more institutionalized one.
And maybe to push back there of like, all right, I started with my AirDNA data, then I get my uplisting PMS, I integrate through Price Labs to automate my pricing, and then automate through guest communications through Besty, like, and I've got 2 units, like, I've got all that integrated through Turno to make sure that cleaner knows when to clean and send photos and like, why do I need a property management company if I can automate essentially the entire business through my PMS?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely true, and that's probably part of the pitch that we should say is like empowering people to do it themselves. But I spent way too much time with our customers that are like acquiring even decently well-run property management companies and making them 2 or 3 times more profitable just by buying them. And because of software spend, it adds up. Because of your individual cleaner cost and economies of scale, that and tips and tricks, like the admin console of a Price Labs looks like a rocket ship. Like no person, like even an informed, interested person just gets lost in the functionality there. You have revenue management. You have, I think you definitely can make the argument that yes, eventually is AI going to do all of that? Like people are saying that about everything. That's a little like bubbly to me. That's like a little frothy. I don't think that I think it's a lot more like ironed out. So I agree that the general self-managed person will be more profitable than they were 5 years ago. But I think if we're just talking about pound for pound best returns, and also at the same time, it's great for competition. That it's great. What's going to happen is the percentage of management fees is probably going to compress a bit because of like all of these really good property managers and their how much profit they can run. That will result. It might not be a 25%, fee. I think that like at 10%, like would I pay 10 or 15% management fees to not have to do anything and get 95% of returns, like, and not have to worry about getting called at 4 a.m. or dealing with a maintenance issue, you know what I mean? Just to make this a passive asset class. Because until it becomes a no-brainer for somebody to be able to buy this and say, I don't have to do anything the same way I sign a 1-year lease and I get better returns, until that happens, I don't think you're going to see a huge influx of like institutional people trying to go into short-term rentals because the lending power on long-term rentals is just infinitely more powerful than like any sort of cash flow from a short-term rental. So I guess I see where you're coming from, but I think like, who knows? I guess who knows?
I mean, maybe let's pick that apart a bit more. And do you think there's any sort of next big things that are coming? Like, I talk about that 4 a.m. call. Like, is that something that conversational AI could answer for me? And like,
For sure.
I know,
Yeah.
are there tech improvements coming down the line that are going to solve that last little aspect that maybe does put property managers out of business? Or is there that personal aspect that is going to keep it sort of separate?
Yeah. I mean, I think that this was even before my time. So it's more as like a tourist that I saw this of like the Sonder Vacasa sort of like mass management, like grow to as high of inventory as possible. It's like so sad. They were like a couple years too early. You know what I mean? Like if you had that same value prop like a Sonder today, and this is why I think it's the best time to be a property management company, is that like the rate of acceleration, just like look at us and look at like the rate that like the customers are demanding improvements, and then how fast all these hyperscalers are competing for the best models. Like, there's so much money going into it that now would be sort of the better time to build it. Like you could be, right place, wrong time sort of thing a couple of years ago. But I think like ultimately, I think like being able to, a big, very specific example is sort of this voice AI, which is just next level. I recommend anybody go on ChatGPT, go to the advanced voice assistant. It can speak to you in any language, with any accent, with any sort of dialect, like down to, like perfect, never, like we are so far past the Turing test, like you would just never know in a million years. But I'll give you an example. If we started building that a year ago or 6 months ago, when a voice comes in, the AI would have to turn that into text, analyze it, and then output text, and then go to a voice model and output voice. Just in the last 6 months, a couple of weeks ago, OpenAI just abstracted all of that away. It's voice in, voice out, real time. Another example is Minecraft, which I've never played Minecraft. It's like a phenomenon I guess, a little bit too old. But a gaming company just got backed by Sequoia that doesn't even have a gaming engine behind it. The entire game is being rendered in real time with AI models. So there's no gaming engine, there's no 3D modeling, there's nothing. It's all real time. Just completely abstracted layer of what everybody thought, Unreal Engine. Like I saw that, I was like, short, I haven't checked the stock price, but short Unreal Engine, short all of those things. This is not financial advice, but I looked at that and that's what I thought. And so I think there's an opportunity cost of trying to go deep into AI right now that's just sort of silly. Like imagine building a chatbot for websites 3 years ago. People were building that. Unless you had a really great distribution moat, like all of that tech you built, throw it out the door. Tesla, full self-driving, went from computer vision only to LLMs with FSD12 and just threw all the stuff out that they used before. So I think that's why one thing that we can bank on is if we're going to customers, you don't have to, no vendor is coming out there and saying, we're going to do everything for you. You just have to be really good enough at one thing because most people aren't getting an applied AI chatbot that's good enough at responding to people. So deliver there as the industry sort of regulates, sort of hits inflection points, which right now feels exponential. Eventually, when it starts sort of flattening out a little bit, then we go, okay, how do we invest in the right AI? That's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah. And so how much, and maybe now getting closer to wrapping up, how much of your future sort of roadmap and future functionality you think is like going to be dictated by what the large modeling companies sort of come up with, and like if they can do real-time chat, and like then you've got the hooks to all the PMSs, like you're able to do the connection from what GPT builds to actual applications to, and what we're using on a day-to-day basis almost seamlessly, it would seem like.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we spent our first 6 months on OpenAI, and with like clever prompting, we're able to completely unhook from that and hook into Gemini because it's 99% cheaper. And so there's the question. The first question is, which model do you pick? And maybe eventually that won't matter because you'll just have a network of models and constantly be A/B testing them. But then to your point, it's kind of like, yeah, building the pipes for all of these people. And then ultimately we could go a million different directions. Like, but at the end of the day, like what a customer tells us to build is like, that's the best signal we could get. Maybe not that one customer, but a variety of them. And then you put that in your roadmap. And so I think like, yeah, it would serve us, well to continue to deliver on a consistent product, be mindful of all the things that are coming out, which are just next level. Like we're right in that, but that's a whole echo chamber over there as well. We're like deciding what you really want to build is really important. So I think that, yes, I think Ring Central, I think the sort of voice of record, the call, that level of escalation, AI could do a really good job at that. But by definition, when you're getting a call, it's usually an emergency. You're going to be tied anyway. So we're just not jumping at the opportunity to see like the flashy stuff that demos well. Like we don't want to be like a demoware. It's sort of like we kind of want to be like consistent, boring, delivers on what it says it's going to deliver thing, and then leave it to the models to duke it out, see what they can build, and then give that to the doorsteps of these big operators.
So if I have you back a year from now, what are we going to be talking about?
Oh, that's a good one. Wow, a year. I was walking around Burma this year and comparing it to when I was there last year. We had just pivoted into this company, and we were doing, I think 1,000 in revenue. And I was walking around this time at the end when everybody's packing up, and I was like, I never would have saw this coming. You know what I mean? So I think that on the sort of tactical side, I think that there's just going to be way more of the job done with AI. So like I said, like doing things a human does to update reservations, to send multi, dependencies, like person says, hey, there's a leak, there's a toilet clogged, Besty sending a message to the plumber on file, asking them when they're available. That goes back to the guest, say, hey, can we come by at 2 or 3 p.m.? And then closing the loop there, like doing deeper into the day-to-day operations, like more embedded, I think is like, those are some like tactical details. Maybe we'll have like a voice system that fields 50% of the questions and then pushes it through to the operator like you, to deal with the emergencies. But ultimately, I think this is just going to be, we're 5 or 6 PMSs now. The big thing is going to be, 25 and 30, and instead of doing $1 million in revenue, we're 5 or 6 in revenue. And instead of being a tiny icon in one of the big conferences, maybe we're the headline sponsor, stuff like that, just to like, it's kind of a race right now in this branded category. You have all these people like us just duking it out. And ultimately, it's just going to benefit the consumer the most, both on pricing and the services offered. So hopefully more of the same, still having fun, and just bigger and better, I think.
Well, I'm look forward to the conversation here, and maybe we'll play this back and see how it turned out.
Yeah, I'm up for the challenge.
Awesome. Well, Sam, how can people find more about you, find more about Besty AI?
Yeah, our website is besty, besty.nyc. That's probably the easiest one to remember here in New York City. You can see me on LinkedIn, Sam Dundas. Yeah, LinkedIn, email is the best way to get in touch with me. You can reach out on our website, book a demo. Yeah, I'm always around.
Awesome. Well, Sam, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great seeing you, Jamie. Thank you.